everyone, and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Hannah, and I am a nutrition educator with Cornell Cooperative Extension of Jefferson County. Today is another video in the series, What Can I Cook With? But today it's Meatless Edition for Meatless Monday. This is a series where I take ingredient suggestions from the community and show you what you can cook with them. So today's recipe is for quinoa, which I'm very excited about because I've had this half of a cup sitting on my grain shelf right over there for like the last month or two. So I'm excited to try something and use it up for once. So today we will be doing meatless sloppy joes using some quinoa and some pinto beans. We will also be adding in a lot of veggies to it. So I've got some spinach and some canned mushrooms here. And it's going to give us a lot of really great flavors, some different textures, and just give us something new to try on this fantastic Monday. So I'm going to start by cooking the quinoa because that's going to be the part that's going to take the longest. One way that you can shorten this recipe is if you use some time on the weekend when you have a lot of extra time, maybe, you can make a big bunch of it and use some of it and put some of it in the freezer for later. Essentially what we're going to do, this is how you will cook quinoa for pretty much anything. So I've got a half cup quinoa here. Just going to add it to my saucepan. And then I've got 1 cup of water. So I'm going to pour it into my bowl so I can get all those extra little pieces out. So this is going to be the ratio for quinoa. If you make more of it or less of it, it's going to be 2 parts water to 1 part quinoa. So I've got it in there. I'm going to go ahead and put it on my stove over here and bring it up to a low boil. There we go. So we got that going on there. Once it comes up to a boil, I'm going to cover it and reduce it to a simmer. And then it's going to go down for about 15 minutes. So in the meantime, I can prep the rest of my flavorings for this delicious dish. So over here, I have my big cast iron. I'm going to add some oil to it. You can use whatever kind of oil you have. I have canola oil today. You're just going to need about 1 tablespoon. I'm glad you think it looks good, Caitlin. I think it'll look even better at the end. All right, so we're going to get this warming up. And this is going to be to heat our onion up. So I already diced that here. I had a half an onion. If you have a whole onion, that's even better. I'm just kind of running out of groceries at this point, so it's going to be a really great pantry meal. This is also a great meal that you can make a big batch of all at once. So if you double or triple this recipe and you could portion some of it out to freeze, it gets even better with time, or you can repurpose it throughout the week in different leftovers. So I like to put this inside tacos, so you could have it tomorrow for Taco Tuesday. You could also put it on top of like lettuce bowls and have it with some different toppings on there, maybe sprinkle some cheese and some extra veggies in there. It's a really great dish to just move it around, have it a bunch of different meals a week, which I like. So I'm going to go ahead and add in my onion. All right, we'll let that cook around for a couple minutes. I want it to get nice and caramelized, starting to get a little brown around the edges. This will bring some extra flavor to our dish, make it a little bit smokier, a little more complex in flavor, which if you think to the traditional sloppy joes that are made with meat, that's kind of the taste we're going for. All right, so we'll just let those cook right down right now. The quinoa is almost boiling. Now let me just show you again some of the things that we're going to be mixing in and going a little bit in depth. So I have some canned mushrooms here. You'll notice that when you go to the supermarket or the grocery store, they don't have a lot of low sodium options for canned mushrooms. So I wanted to go ahead and I gave this a rinse just in a colander. That will get all the excess sodium off. and reduce your intake, which if you remember from previous videos, we're trying to do because we want to make sure that we're reducing our blood pressure. So having too much sodium can increase your risk for high blood pressure, which can increase your risk for heart disease and stroke. And then in the short term, too much sodium can make you feel bloated and a little bit swollen, dehydrated. So just reducing it when we can is really important, especially in the foods that we can't always taste the saltiness in, so like canned vegetables. So these are rinsed. I have my low sodium diced tomatoes that will be going in. I'm using diced tomatoes, but if you had tomato sauce, you could absolutely use that, especially if you have a tomato sauce that maybe already has some herbs and spices blended in. That would be great. Give you a little extra pop of flavor. And then, as I mentioned before, I have pinto beans. I cooked these from dry because I had time, but if you don't have time, canned options are just as great. Just make sure, again, you're giving them a good rinse. All right, so I'm actually going to start mashing up my pinto beans. This will help release some of the starches and help my sloppy joe stick together a little bit more. So I'm just going to mash them up loosely. If you don't have pinto beans or you don't like pinto beans, you could sub in another bean at this point. If you want to do like black beans, white beans, even lentils would be really great. On the same line, if you don't have quinoa, you could still make this recipe. You would just cook the grains again separately and then mix them in when I mix in the quinoa. Quinoa is great though because it is a complete protein. So if you are a vegetarian or vegan or just trying to get more protein in your diet, quinoa can offer that. And it's really great to fit into a bunch of different places. So like in the sloppy joes that I'm doing tonight, you could also mix it in with your morning oatmeal. You can mix it into meatballs. You can really use quinoa in a lot of different ways to add just that extra bit of protein. It also has all the benefits of a whole grain, even though technically it is not a whole grain, but it's very similar nutritionally and culinarily. So a lot of times we just lump them together. So you still get all those great benefits of having a lot of fiber and a lot of the vitamins that you would find in a whole grain. Quinoa is actually in the same family as Swiss chard and our spinach here. So we're going to have a little bit of a family reunion in our sloppy joes tonight. All right, so this is about how mashed you want them to be. You can see I still have some bean chunks here, but overall, they're pretty mushy. So now my onions are cooking up. I'm going to go ahead and add in my mushrooms because I want those to get a little bit more cooked as well. A little bit of caramelization on those. Just give it a good stir so everything gets mixed together. The oil coats all of your veggies. And I've got this on about medium right now. I find that if you try to saute veggies on too high of a heat, you really run the risk of burning them and caramelizing them too fast. All right, and my quinoa is just starting to boil here. So I'm going to go ahead and cover it, and we'll let it boil until all the water has evaporated, and which is about 15 minutes. And set my timer here. So while these are cooking up, we're going to wait a couple minutes for the quinoa to be ready because we're going to mix everything together in the pot. So in the meantime, I've got a fun surprise for you all. Well, I hope it's fun for you all. It's fun for me. But I'm going to be doing a bonus demo of banana chewy cookies. And so these are going to be a way that you can use up those overly ripe bananas if you're kind of sick of making banana bread. So I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth, and I'll be sure to let you know what part I'm working on when. But for right now, our sloppy joes, quinoa's boiling, onions and mushrooms are cooking, and we're just kind of waiting. Oh, while that's going on, got my 2 bananas in here. They were already pretty ripe this morning. I just added them to a paper bag to get them a little bit riper, a little bit mushier, a little bit sweeter. That's a quick way to ripen certain fruits, is to put them in a bag together, because as they are releasing their, I believe it's methane gas, that helps the other ones ripen. So we'll go ahead and add these in. So got 1 and 2. And I already used my bean musher over here, so I'm just going to try to mush them up with a spoon. This is great if you have kids. You could have them be mushing it. You could also use the bottom of a glass to mush these. And the more ripe they are, the easier they're going to mush. But if you have kids, you could have them do the mushing. You could also put these in a bag if you have littler ones and you're worried about a mess. It's just going to be a nice way to use up these overly ripe bananas. You can also always just peel your bananas, stick them in a Ziploc bag in the fridge, and use them in smoothies or thaw them out and use them in baked goods at a future point. All right, so there's my last one's all mushed up right here. So now I'm going to take a pause from my bananas, and we're going to check on our onions and our mushrooms. If anyone's just jumping on right now, just so you're not confused, these are 2 separate recipes. We've got our meatless sloppy joes going on over here, and then the bananas are part of our dessert, which is going to be some banana cookies. I realize that might seem kind of like a weird combination. Right, so I'm going to turn my heat down low at this point, and I'm going to add in all of my ingredients except for my quinoa and my spinach. And that way all the flavors can just start to meld together. So I've got my 15 ounces of diced tomatoes. Got my pinto beans. There's about 2 cups. If you were using canned beans, that would be 2 cans, 2 of the smaller cans. I think they're like 15 ounces. 2 of those. Sorry about that if you just heard all my dishes crashing. All right. And then we're going to add in some flavorings. So I've got smoked paprika. You could also use normal paprika. I just like that this one has a little bit of extra smokiness. So I'm going to add 1 teaspoon here, sprinkling it on. Then I'm going to add in some oregano. I've got 1/2 of a teaspoon. Actually, I'm almost, perfect. I thought I was going to be out, so 1/2 teaspoon there. If you are out of your oregano, you could sub in parsley. That would be fine. And then I need 2 teaspoons of chili powder. My chili powder has paprika in it, so I'm just going to use the same measuring spoon. So 2 teaspoons here of the chili powder. All right. And then I'm going to add some Worcestershire sauce. I'm going to add in a tablespoon there. If you don't have Worcestershire sauce, you could use like agave would be a fine substitute. It'll give it a little bit more of a sweeter flavor, but still that kind of complexity, that depth. You can also find reduced sodium Worcestershire sauce. And I'm not going to say the name of this anymore. So now we're going to add some low sodium soy sauce, a tablespoon of that. My 1/2 tablespoon here, so I'm going to do 2 of these. 1, 2. And again, my skillet, my cast iron over here is on low right now. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this all together. Since the quinoa is already cooked, we don't really need to worry about there being a lot of liquid in here. We want there to be a little bit so that the quinoa can absorb a little bit of the tomato flavorings, but it's not going to be super liquidy at this point. So I'm going to keep it on low, medium low, and just let all the flavors meld together here, kind of cook together. Make sure that you don't have any of your beans really sticking together in any big chunks. All right. Oops. So that's what this looks like here. And we'll just let that keep cooking, and we'll go back to our banana cookie dessert. Okay, so I had my mashed banana going on here. Now that it's kind of sat for a little bit, I can mush it up a little bit more. I'm just going to go ahead and leave that. I'm going to add in some walnuts, maybe about a half a cup or so, maybe a quarter of a cup, somewhere in there. It's kind of just to taste, to preference. And I'm just going to give these a rough chop so that we don't get any large pieces and they bake pretty evenly and they evenly distribute. So the walnuts are great. They're going to have healthy fats in them. So that makes this a really good dessert, but also a really good snack to have on the go. Kind of a good alternative. And I'm going to cut up a few more. So you'll notice I'm holding my knife in a pincher grip. I've got my forefinger actually on the blade curled around here, and my thumb's actually pinching the blade. This gives you a lot more control over the knife. Sometimes we might feel like we want to be as far away from the blade as possible, but this can lead to instability and actually could lead you to injuring yourself more. So you actually want to be right up on here. You also don't want to be holding it with your finger like this. This can lead to wrist problems and carpal tunnel. You don't want to put that kind of pressure on your wrist. You want to make sure everything's moving kind of in the best way possible. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add these into my bananas. And as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. Also, if you have suggestions for ingredients you want to see in the future, you can drop them in the chat box, in the comment box, or you can message us on Facebook. Our Facebook page is at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Jefferson County. Just going to go ahead and stir this a little bit before I move on to my next step over here. Check on my quinoa. It's actually looking pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and put a pause on this. So let me go ahead and show you our quinoa here. I'm just going to use my teaspoon. You can see it's pretty fluffy right now. There is no water at the bottom, but it's also not sticking to the bottom, which is perfect. This is exactly how we want it. One trick for cooking quinoa is before you cook it, you want to go ahead and give it a good rinse. This will help remove any residual starches on the outside, any dirt, any dust from packaging. This will help make it cleaner if you're removing like dust and dirt, but it'll also help it get fluffier. So when you're removing those residual starches, it won't get gummy together. And you really have this nice fluffy quinoa, which I'm now adding to our pinto bean, tomato, onion, mushroom, and spices mix. So now that it's in here, I'm going to go ahead and mix it up really well. And we're just going to let it simmer together so that the quinoa can absorb some of the tomatoey flavors. It can all get mixed together. So that's about what it looks like now. Not that much different. You can't see the quinoa as well. But we're going to go ahead and just let that cook together. Again, letting the flavors meld. If yours looks really dry, so you can see mine looks kind of wet. There's some liquid in the corners, things like that. If yours is looking really dry or it seems like it's sticking to the bottom of the pan, you can go ahead and just add in a little bit of water, maybe about a tablespoon at a time, not very much. Okay, so letting this cook. And we just have a few more steps over here. There's only 5 ingredients total, which is really great. So we're going to go ahead and add in our oatmeal. So I'm using old-fashioned oats, rolled oats. You could also use quick cooking. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to add in 1 cup. So we're getting some good whole grains in this, provide some fiber, help promote satiety, and then also, again, promoting your heart health. So mixing this up together just a little bit because now I'm going to add in some cinnamon. So I'm adding in 1 teaspoon. My teaspoon was dirty, if you remember, so I'm going to add in 4 1/4 teaspoons. If you have older kids, this is kind of a great time to work on measuring and math and its practical applications in the kitchen, talking about how can I get the amount that I want if I only have this size, things like that. Just getting them involved. And then I'm going to add some vanilla. I'm going to add vanilla extract. I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon there. If you don't have cinnamon, I think nutmeg would be a fine substitute. Or if you like pumpkin pie spice, something like that. Something that's a little bit warmer. All right, and then we're mixing this together now. So they're all really, it's all pretty well mixed. I just want to make sure that there's no giant chunks of banana. I want to make sure that there's no clumps of cinnamon that could bring a surprise about. So there we have that here. So these I'm just going to scoop out onto my greased baking sheet. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees, and they'll cook for about 10-15 minutes. So again, this is a fun one you could do if you have younger kids especially. You could put all the ingredients in the bag for them and have them just kind of mush it, mix it together. You do want to kind of flatten these out though. That way they'll cook through, though there aren't any raw eggs or anything like that in here. So there's not really a concern about food safety, just in terms of taste and texture. And these won't spread, so you can actually put them really close together. And then, as I mentioned before, they go in a 350-degree oven for about 10 to 15 minutes. They won't really get golden, but you'll see they really firm up. They won't be very crumbly. And then you get to eat them for dessert. It's a pretty good celebration for a Monday, I think. You could also make these into like little peanut butter sandwiches if you wanted to, once they're cooked, put some peanut butter between 2 of them. Something like that. Again, really a big fan of these versatile recipes that you can adapt and make them your own. So there we go. We'll go ahead and pop these in. So then our sloppy Joe mixture has been simmering. I'm seeing a little bit of the liquid bubble around. So I'm going to add in my spinach. I want to add this towards the end of the cooking process. because I don't want it to overcook. I don't want it to get kind of that really shriveled, really dark green color. I just want it to be lightly wilted. When spinach or vitamin C, which is in spinach, is exposed to heat, it does tend to degrade. So we don't want to overheat it, but it is great to heat it at some amount because that makes your body more able to use the iron that is in spinach. So just making sure not to overcook it and just get it lightly wilted is going to be kind of the sweet spot in terms of flavor, in terms of texture, and in terms of the getting the nutrients out of it. You can see it still has kind of these big chunks that are sticking up. You can see when the stems are sticking in the air that it's not quite cut through. You could add in other veggies at this point. You don't have to add spinach. You could add something else that your family enjoys. I think green beans would be great. Peas might be interesting. Kale, if you have it, cut kale up very small or add it a little bit sooner. You could add in sweet potatoes. Really add in whatever your family enjoys and make it so that you are enjoying your Meatless Monday and trying a new thing each time you make this dish. Shake it up. This is also great to have on hand. I think I mentioned it in terms of tacos, but having it on hand for quesadillas. You could also mix this mixture with some breadcrumbs and an egg and turn it into meatballs. You could add some ground meat to this. If y'all love your ground meats, that would be absolutely fine. So this is what it looks like. We're going to go ahead and have it on some whole grain rolls. But you could have it on a bed of lettuce, a bed of more spinach if you like. The options are pretty endless. Oops, you don't need to see the underside of my cabinets. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you watched the whole video, if you don't mind filling out the Qualtrics federal reporting spreadsheet that's in our comments box, this helps us make sure that we are reaching out to our community and providing content that is relevant to folks. So if you don't mind, it's just a few short questions. We'd really appreciate it. I also teach a family snacking class on Thursdays. You can find out the information about that class and all of the other programming that Cornell Cooperative Extension of Jefferson County does on our Facebook page or by visiting our website. The recipe for the cookies is down in the description box as well, but the Sloppy Joe recipe was one that I have adapted, so you'll just have to keep watching the video to make sure you get that. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll be sure to check back in on this. You can also message us on Facebook and be sure to get back to you. But thank you and enjoy the rest of your Monday.